A low wind crawls over the ruins of old Salem village, slipping through the leaning stones and splintered fence posts, like a voice that has waited far too long to be heard. And if you listen closely, closer than comfort allows, you may hear a second whisper beneath it. The name of a girl who should have grown old but didn't, a child the court never recorded, a family that vanished, and a legend that has never stopped aging even though she supposedly never did. They called her the Witch Child of Salem Village. Not in the official documents. The judges at the 1692 trials avoided naming children when they could, especially those too young to fully understand the accusations thrown at them. But in the cabins, in the fields, in the taverns, and in the frightened words passed along firelit tables long after the last gallows fell silent, people spoke of her. A small girl said to commune with something no one dared describe. A girl who, some said, the devils themselves feared to touch. Our story begins not in the hysteria of the trials, but in the uneasy quiet that followed. By late 1693, Salem Village, what we know today as modern-day Danvers, was collapsing under the weight of its own fear. Families were torn apart, reputations ruined, neighbors pitted against each other. Half the community wanted to pretend nothing had happened. The other half couldn't forget, because the shadows they had stirred up seemed unwilling to settle. It was during this uneasy rebirth that the whispers of the witch child began to take shape. People said she had been no older than 9, a slight pale thing with black eyes and a way of standing utterly still when spoken to, as though she were listening to something else entirely. Her family, another casualty of the witchcraft hysteria, had kept mostly to themselves. They lived not on the main road, but closer to the forest edge, in a crooked little home built on stony soil where nothing seemed eager to grow. Her name, according to the handful of fragmented accounts we have, was Mercy Hill. Mercy appears only indirectly in surviving documents. Never accused formally, never questioned, never jailed. But her mother, Abigail Hill, was one of several women examined privately after rumors spread that her young daughter had the sight. And while Abigail was ultimately dismissed due to lack of evidence, she emerged from those interrogations a changed woman, gaunt, sleepless, terrified of something she would not name. She stopped bringing Mercy to church. The minister at the time, Reverend Samuel Parris, yes, the same minister central to the original trials, made a sermonized example of the family more than once. He warned the village that the devil often sought the weakest vessels and that innocence of age did not guarantee spiritual innocence. The day after one of those sermons, the Hill family disappeared. Some said they fled north. Others claimed they were summoned deeper into the forest by something that had been waiting for them. A few insisted that Mercy wasn't the one taken, that she was the one doing the taking, and that her parents followed her like trembling servants. Most people simply wanted the Hills gone. And once they were, Salem Village breathed easier. For a while. But then the lights began. The first report came from a cooper named Elias Felton. Returning home after dark, he saw, flickering between the trees, what looked like a lantern being carried by someone far too small to be out in the forest alone. When he called out, the lantern rose off the ground slowly, steadily, until it hung at the height of a grown man. Elias ran so quickly, he left his tools behind. The second sighting came a week later. A group of children gathering firewood near dusk saw a figure step silently from behind a large pine. They described her as a young girl wearing a shift far too thin for the cold. Her face, they said, was pale, not in the way of sickness, but like something that had never seen the sun. And her eyes. Every child gave the same detail. They were wrong. Not glowing, not monstrous, just wrong. As though something behind them was looking out. One child claimed the girl spoke a single sentence. "You grew," she supposedly said. "Why did you grow?" Minutes later, the children burst into the nearest cabin shrieking, and a search party was assembled. No girl was found, but prints were discovered in the frost. Bare footprints. So small they could only belong to someone Mercy's age. Except for one detail. The footprints went on for nearly a mile without showing the slightest shift in weight, as though the girl had walked without ever lifting or lowering her feet. From here, the legend began to swell. Throughout the early 1700s, diaries and letters from the region contain occasional references to strange nighttime phenomena along the Danvers woods. Lights drifting between the branches. faint voices echoing where no people walked, and in at least 2 cases, the sound of a child humming an unfamiliar melody. A minister's journal from 1706 includes this cryptic entry: "The child in the trees is a reminder that sin does not die when the sinner flees. Some roots never stop growing." There is no name mentioned, but the townspeople already knew who he meant. Meanwhile, settlement slowly expanded outward around Salem village. New families built farms on the wood's edge, unaware of the local superstitions until they experienced them firsthand. Cattle would panic at night without reason. Chickens stopped laying eggs. Infants woke screaming at the exact same hour, night after night. A farmer named Jacob Hobb recorded a particularly chilling event in 1712. He claimed that while repairing a fence at dusk, he saw a young girl crouched beneath a boulder near the tree line. Thinking she might be lost, he approached, only to hear her whispering softly as though speaking to someone hidden in the earth itself. Hobb called out, and the girl turned slowly toward him. He fled immediately. But what struck him most, he later wrote, was not her pale face or her emotionless stare. It was her teeth. They were tiny, human, but too many, far too many. Word spread, fear grew, and then, as decades passed, sightings seemed to cease. But legends have a way of retreating rather than dying. By the mid-17th century, locals no longer spoke of Mercy Hill. They simply referred to her as the witch child, a ghost, a devil, a residual curse born from the mass paranoia that had consumed the region. Parents warned children not to wander too close to the woods after sunset. Travelers were told to keep to the main road, and every so often a hunter or scout whispered about seeing a small shadow dart between the trunks, or hearing the delicate crunch of tiny footsteps where no child should be. Then came a document that resurrected the legend in a way no folktale ever could. In 1784, a surveyor named Jonathan Crown mapped the Danvers woodlands. His notebook survived, though badly damaged. Among his notes is a page titled simply, "The Child." Crown claimed he encountered a girl no older than 8 wandering barefoot through a clearing. She appeared lost, but not frightened. When he asked where her family was, she pointed to the trees. "All around," she whispered. Crown tried to lead her toward the road, but as he took her hand, he felt something impossible. Her skin was warm, but beneath it there was no pulse. He described the sensation as holding a living shell. The girl looked up at him with empty calm and asked, "Did you come back for me?" Crown let go. The girl blinked, stepped backward, and vanished from sight the moment she crossed into the shadow of a tree. Not ran, not ducked, simply disappeared, as though the forest swallowed her whole. Modern historians often dismiss this story as superstition or misinterpretation. Yet Crown's notes are unquestionably real. And he was not known for embellishment. He was a veteran of the Revolutionary War, a disciplined cartographer, and a deeply religious man who had no interest in propagating ghost stories. Still, he wrote what he believed he saw. More sightings followed across the next century, though increasingly sparse. A mid-1800s schoolteacher walking home late saw a girl in a white shift standing beside an abandoned well. A hunter in 1849 glimpsed a child running through thick brush without disturbing a single branch. A Danvers midwife claimed that on the night her own daughter died of fever, she awoke to find a pale girl standing at the foot of her bed, watching her with a look of serene curiosity. But the strangest piece of evidence came from a place no one expected. In 1891, workers renovating an old farmstead near the forest uncovered a collapsed root cellar buried beneath the foundations. Inside, they found remnants of early colonial household items, bowls, iron tools, fabric scraps, and something else. A small wooden doll with hair made from human fibers. Its face was carved with unsettling precision. Wide eyes, tiny mouth, and teeth. Visible teeth, too many for any child's toy. Experts dated the carving style to the late 1600s. Pinned to the doll's dress was a fragment of parchment inscribed with one word: mercy. The discovery reignited interest in the witch child legend, and folklorists descended on the region. Some argued Mercy Hill had been a real child who suffered from a congenital disorder, her apparent inability to age caused by malnutrition or illness. Others believed she had been no more than a symbolic ghost story, an embodiment of the guilt Salem village carried long after the trials. But then there were those who considered another possibility, that Mercy Hill lived, that she survived the trials, survived the woods, survived the death of her parents, that she grew not older, but stranger, becoming something that lingered, watching as the world changed around her, and that the lights in the trees, the barefoot prints, the frost-still footsteps were signs not of her haunting, but of her presence. Even today, hikers along the Danvers trails report strange experiences. The feeling of being watched. A child's laugh carried on still air. Pale shapes slipping between the pines as twilight falls. And when asked to describe what they saw, almost every witness says the same thing. She looked too young to be out here alone. She looked too young to be out here alone. That single sentence appears again and again in modern accounts, spoken by hikers who don't know each other, who've never read the old journals, who have no reason to repeat the same unsettling detail, yet they do. And what unsettles researchers most is what follows. When witnesses are asked to describe the girl's expression, her posture, even the way she moved, they struggle. They remember the pale face, they remember the dark eyes, but when pressed, they falter, suddenly unsure whether her feet touch the ground at all. A strange detail begins creeping into these modern sightings, something eerily consistent with the earliest reports. Witnesses say the girl seems curious, as though she's studying them, not attempting to frighten or flee. One man described it perfectly. It was like she was trying to figure out what I was. And that's where Mercy Hill's legend turns from ghost story to something far more unsettling. The possibility that the witch child isn't a remnant of the past, but something that continued learning, watching, adapting as centuries passed. To understand why this idea persists, we need to revisit the fragmentary scraps of Mercy's childhood that have survived. Her mother, Abigail, before disappearing into the woods, had been recorded as saying her daughter knew things she could not know. Neighbors claimed Mercy sometimes answered questions before they were asked, or stood for long stretches facing corners, listening to voices they couldn't hear. One woman documented that Mercy once walked into her kitchen, stared at an empty chair, and said, "He's not here yet." Moments later, the woman's husband entered the house. Was it coincidence, imagination, or something the girl truly saw? More chilling are the few accounts describing the girl's reaction to injury. A neighbor boy pushed Mercy during an argument. She fell onto a stone threshold, splitting the skin of her forearm, but instead of crying, she simply stared at the wound with mild curiosity. Then looked up at the boy, smiled faintly, and said, "You'll pay that back later." By the next morning, the boy awoke with a fever so high he nearly died. No cause was ever found. Incidents like this didn't officially appear in court records, but they lived in the oral histories of Salem, whispered by families who never forgot how different the Hill child had seemed. And though Abigail Hill swore her daughter was simply sensitive, she kept Mercy closer than most mothers of the time, rarely letting the girl out of arm's reach. Some say Abigail's fear wasn't of the villagers, but of whatever might have chosen her daughter in the first place. Modern folklore scholars suggest Mercy may have suffered from a neurological condition or been traumatized by community paranoia. But to the settlers of 1693, fearful, superstitious, and deeply religious, Mercy's behavior could only mean one thing. She was touched by something unnatural. Which brings us back to the family's disappearance. Their cabin, when searched months later, showed no signs of struggle, no blood, no torn clothing. A single candle had burned itself into a puddle of hardened wax on the table. The chairs were pushed neatly in, dishes clean, their few belongings still there. It was as though the family had simply stepped outside and never returned. Except for one detail. In the cold ash of the hearth, investigators found the faint outline of a child's bare footprint. Smaller than Mercy's should have been at that age. So small, some believed it belonged to a toddler. But at that point, Mercy would have been nearly 10. Theories varied. Some claimed the footprint was simply old, preserved in the soot. Others insisted it looked too clean, too defined, as though left recently. Still others whispered that Mercy had changed. Stories from the early 1700s describe a girl who always looked the same height, the same face, the same pale body frozen at the cusp of childhood. And when witnesses saw her, sometimes months apart, she never appeared older. Diaries of settlers often repeated the same phrasing, she was as she had been. And then, inevitably, as though time would not claim her, the legend deepened when a group of boys from a nearby village followed strange lights into the forest one winter night. They returned terrified, claiming they'd seen a circle of children, silent, unmoving, surrounding a girl in a white shift. The boys swore the children were not alive. Their faces, they said, were smooth and blank, like carved wood. The girl at the center, whom they identified as Mercy, touched each wooden-faced child gently, as though instructing them. One boy claimed the children moved only when she commanded. Critics dismissed this as a child's nightmare. Yet the boys maintained the story their entire lives. What the villagers feared most wasn't that Mercy was a ghost, or a witch, or even a demon. It was that she might be something older than any of those ideas. Something that came before names. Something that the panic of the witch trials accidentally uncovered and set free. Because Mercy Hill didn't just appear in sightings. She appeared in dreams. From the 1720s through the early 1800s, dozens of people reported the same dream. A girl standing in a grove of trees, watching quietly as they approached. She would tilt her head, raise her hand as if to beckon them closer, and everyone woke before they reached her. Dreams are easy to dismiss, except for one detail. The grove they described was real. A small clearing deep in what is now the Danvers State Forest matches their descriptions perfectly. A ring of pines forming a natural enclosure, a mossy stone at the center, and a stillness so heavy that some hikers today refuse to enter it. Locals call it Mercy's Step. In the 1850s, a historian investigating the legend visited the grove and wrote, "The air here feels unsettled, as if I trespass somewhere I do not belong." He stayed only minutes. Later that night, he recorded hearing a child's voice outside his inn window. "She asked why I grew old, he wrote. She asked it twice." By the late 19th century, the witch child had cemented herself as a figure of folklore, an enduring reminder of Salem's lingering guilt and paranoia. But for those who live near the forest even now, she is more than folklore. She is a presence, a watcher. Some modern hikers claim they've seen her silhouette dart behind the trees. Others have captured faint figures on phone cameras. Blurry, pale, childlike. A few have reported a small hand grabbing theirs in the dark. But the most chilling testimony comes from a woman walking her dog at dusk. She says she saw a little girl standing perfectly still at the base of a pine tree. Thinking she was lost, the woman approached, calling out. The girl didn't respond, but as the woman stepped within 15 feet, her dog, a calm, gentle old retriever, suddenly lunged backward, whimpering in terror. And the girl smiled. It was the same faint, almost curious smile described in accounts over 2 centuries old. "She looked about 9, the woman said afterward. 9, maybe 10, too young to be out there alone." Which brings us full circle to the question that haunts Mercy Hill's legend. If she truly lived, if she truly survived the trials, what did she become? Was she a traumatized child, misunderstood by a frightened community? Or was she something adopted by the forest, reshaped by an older, darker presence in those woods? Perhaps the most unsettling theory is the simplest one, that Mercy Hill didn't die, didn't age, didn't disappear. She adapted. The forest kept her, changed her, hid her in its shadows, and each generation since has caught brief, fleeting glimpses of something they shouldn't see. A girl who watches, a girl who waits, a girl who never grew up.
Don't turn away. The shadows aren't done yet. Click the next story, if you dare. Subscribe, stay in the dark, and I'll see you where the nightmares wait.